10,112th meeting of the Security Council is called to order.
The Council met Saturday amid low expectations given its current makeup and after failing to arrest recent conflicts in Ukraine, Gaza and Sudan, despite its mandate being the maintenance of international peace and security.
It was striking that diplomats rushed to hold the Council meeting less than 24 hours after the US and Israeli operation began, but then most of them didn't have very much to say. Russia and China criticized the US, but US allies like Britain and France, Denmark and Greece, all actually pulled their punches. They blamed Iran for nuclear proliferation, they blamed Iran for domestic repression, but they didn't question whether the US was breaking international law by launching a bombing campaign. It really did look like no one wanted to take the risk of annoying Washington.
Russia, China, Colombia and Pakistan sharply criticized the US-Israeli-led intervention in the Middle East while also criticizing Iran's retaliatory strikes against Gulf countries in the region. The three African countries, Somalia, the DRC and Liberia, only condemned Iran's retaliation while reminding all UN member states of their obligations under international law and to the UN Charter. Panama, for its part, warned about the unpredictable and unintended consequences of this military escalation, while Bahrain condemned its targeting by Iran in its retaliatory strikes. But it was the 5 European countries, the United Kingdom, France, Denmark, Greece and Latvia, that came in for criticism for only condemning Iran while calling for a return to diplomacy.
The reality is that most NATO members are so nervous about losing the US security umbrella that they just won't criticize President Trump head on. And this is not the first time that we have seen that. In January, the Security Council held an emergency meeting on the US operation to seize President Maduro of Venezuela. And again, in that case, very, very few US allies said anything directly challenging Washington. So there is a sense now that Western countries are willing to give the US a free pass when it infringes international law, unless it really, really directly affects European interests, such as the threats against Greenland that we saw in late January.
Gowan explained that the Europeans had for years sought to make nuclear diplomacy with Iran work with much frustration. And even though they didn't necessarily want to see this military escalation, there was a sense in Europe, according to Gowan, that Iran had it coming.
There is a problem. You know, if you only apply international law when it relates to nice, cuddly countries, then that sort of massively reduces the credibility of international law as a framework for diplomacy, as a framework for negotiations. And I also think that a lot of countries in the global south are looking at this very, very selective European response to US actions, and they see parallels with the way Western countries equivocated over Gaza while demanding that everyone criticize Russia over Ukraine. The double standards narrative, which has been out there, is just getting stronger and stronger.
Asked what a diplomatic off-ramp in this conflict might look like, given the neutered Security Council.
What is striking is that Iran appears to have miscalculated. The countries that could have acted as mediators in this situation were precisely the Gulf countries, which have been trying to promote dialogue between the US and the Iranians for some time. Oman in particular was really trying to find a diplomatic way to avoid war. But by striking those countries, Iran has actually driven them to a much harder line position, where they are also supporting US and Israeli military actions. So it isn't very clear who can act as a mediator in this conflict.
And as a result, an international rules-based system that often appears to function only in name and not in deed. Sherwin Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.